Every 4 years, the American Society of Civil Engineers grades America's infrastructure. For the past several report cards, our roads have consistently received a D grade, with the main issues being congested roadways costing Americans a substantial amount of money in wasted time and fuel every year. With the most recent report card for 2021, the roadways received yet another D grade, citing that 40% of our roadways are in poor and mediocre conditions, which costs motorists an average of $1,000 each year in wasted time and fuel. Simultaneously, there is a more sinister issue that became more apparent over the course of 2020. While overall traffic fatalities are on the decline, over 36,000 pedestrians are dying on the nation's roads every single year. In 2020, due to COVID-19, lockdowns, and companies being forced to embrace work-from-home policies, there were the fewest vehicle miles driven since 2002, with only 7.7 billion vehicle miles driven, which is down from the 8.9 billion vehicle miles driven in the previous year. Intuition would believe that if there were fewer drivers on the road, then there should be fewer fatalities, but the opposite trend occurred. The rate of pedestrian deaths rose from 1.8 deaths per billion vehicle miles traveled in 2019 to 2.2 deaths per billion vehicle miles traveled in 2020. These statistics are disturbing because they indicate that our roadways are so hostile to pedestrians that it is inherently unsafe to be outside of a vehicle even when there are fewer people driving on the road. The typical response to pedestrian deaths along our roadways is to remind people of their personal responsibility to remain safe. In Nevada, for example, 70% of all pedestrian fatalities occur at night, from dusk to dawn. The Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County advises people to wear bright clothing, carry a flashlight, avoid distractions, strictly use crosswalks, and be ever alert of vehicles, even if they have the right of way. The problem with this kind of advice is that it's not particularly helpful. It is stressful walking outside, having to constantly look around and watch out for vehicles, right turning on red, stopping midway through a crosswalk, or paying more attention to oncoming traffic than pedestrians. Motorists are controlling the larger, faster, heavier vehicle that can cause significant damage if the driver loses control. Logically, the share of responsibility should be proportional to whoever causes the brunt of the collision. Yet, for the past century, law enforcement agencies, state highway offices, and state departments of transportation have asserted that the pedestrian carries as much responsibility to avoid an accident as the motorist. Asserting that people have a personal responsibility to remain safe has never been productive, and it only exists as a relic of the propaganda from the early 20th century that placed the responsibility of safety onto pedestrians instead of motorists. In the early 1900s, city streets were a communal area. As it became more popular to own private cars, more people started dying on the city streets, which disproportionately affected children and the elderly. There were campaigns from anti-car activists to limit the speed of cars to 25 miles per hour. In retaliation, automobile interest groups began spreading propaganda to shift the blame of accidents onto pedestrians. On Sunday, November 23, 1924, the New York Times published an article titled "Nation Roused Against Motor Killings." In the passage titled "Analyzing Accidents," they report 2,672 fatalities occurring in the first 9 months of the year. 1,850 accidents were striking pedestrians. A study was conducted to identify the responsibility of 1,923 automobile deaths in the first 9 months. 692 of these fatalities were blamed on the motorists, with the common issues being speeding and violating road rules. 338 of these fatalities were blamed on the physical conditions, such as fog, snow, rain, or surfaces that caused vehicles to skid. The remaining 893 of these fatalities were blamed on the pedestrians, with the main issues being adults jaywalking and children in the city streets. It is important to note that the victims were not doing anything unique in the cities that they lived in. For their entire lives, the streets were a public place shared by everyone, and if they wanted to cross the street, they would simply cross the street. Some of the victims were children who were playing in the street just like children before them, and elderly people who were not agile enough to get out of the way of a reckless driver. Automobile interest groups wanted the city streets to only allow cars, so they created a propaganda campaign that resulted in a social reconstruction of who belongs on the roads. This led to the rise of jaywalking. The term jay may not mean much in today's lexicon, but it used to be a slur, and jaywalking was used to mock victims of an accident, suggesting that they were too stupid to know how to cross a street. The effects of this propaganda campaign ripple into today. When it comes to reducing pedestrian fatalities, a lot of emphasis is placed on jaywalking. There are hefty fines for not crossing a road at a designated crosswalk, and sometimes there are signs that forbid crossing entirely. People are often reminded that they have to be hyper aware to avoid an accident, and if they don't, it's their own fault. This is why the data collected in 2020 is important. It is the best indicator that the problem was never the way people crossed the road or what they were wearing at the time, whereas the design of the roads themselves. It is inherently problematic when the only form of traffic calming is there being too much congestion for vehicles to reach the unsafe speeds that can kill a pedestrian. In order to reduce pedestrian fatalities, cities need to break away from the mentality that the pedestrian shares responsibility to remain safe. Safety is an infrastructure concern, and the design of the roadways must reduce the points of conflict where a collision may occur, and it must reduce the speed that a vehicle can travel, so it is physically impossible for cars to travel at the unsafe speeds that may kill a pedestrian. There are two major contributors to the lethality of an accident: speed and weight. The lethality of a collision increases exponentially as a vehicle's speed increases. When a vehicle is traveling only 20 miles per hour, there is a 10% chance of a fatality or severe injury. When the speed increases to 30 miles per hour, the likelihood is 5 times greater, at a 50% chance of a fatality or severe injury. When a vehicle is traveling 40 miles per hour, there is a 90% chance of a fatality or severe injury. In addition, as a vehicle's weight increases, so does its overall momentum. The most popular vehicles in the United States are heavy-duty trucks and SUVs, which may be safer for the individuals inside of them, but studies have shown that the increased weight, height, and positioning actually makes them more dangerous for whoever is on the receiving end of a collision. I do want to discuss this in greater detail, but that is outside the scope of this video. Since a 5 to 10 mile per hour reduction of the average speed can save a lot of lives, cities should be focused on redesigning their roads to reduce speeds. The only way to ensure that drivers move more carefully when traveling through urban environments is to change the geometry of the roads so the maximum intended speed is the fastest that someone can comfortably travel. That way the speed limit is whatever feels right anyway. Fortunately, some cities have been taking a more productive approach to safety improvements and changing the design of their roadways. In 2013, the Los Angeles Department of Transportation installed a safety improvement on Rowena Avenue in Silver Lake after the death of Ashley Sando, who was struck by a vehicle while crossing the street to see her father. The project involved taking a busy 4-lane street and converting it into a 3-lane street. These kinds of changes are called road diets, and they generally follow the idea of slimming down the amount of space designated for cars and opening it up for alternative modes of transit. There was some opposition from people who feared that a single-lane reduction would cause vehicles to flood the surrounding streets, creating unprecedented amounts of traffic and safety issues in their once peaceful neighborhoods. Fortunately, that didn't happen. When analyzing data collected by the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, the overall traffic volume remained unaffected despite there being fewer lanes. Furthermore, the number of collisions decreased after the project was completed. In 2008 and 2010, there were 6 crashes where unsafe speed was a contributing factor. In 2013 and 2015, there were 0 crashes involving unsafe speeds. Collisions involving pedestrians and bicyclists also declined after the road diet, making it a safer, more accessible place than it was before. This is why changing the design of the street is important for increasing safety. Reducing the number of lanes decreases the number of conflict points where an accident may occur. Increasing the complexity of the environment forces drivers to slow down so they can more carefully observe their surroundings and maneuver through the environment. These kinds of road diets have been implemented all across the country with the same positive results. Drivers travel at slower speeds, there are fewer collisions, and the environment becomes more welcoming to alternative forms of travel. In Santa Monica, after completing a road diet along Ocean Park Boulevard, there was a 65% reduction in collisions and an overall reduction in speed. Outside of the boundaries of the reconstruction, the 85th percentile speed was either at or below 27 miles per hour. For comparison, speeds are approximately 10 miles per hour higher outside of the boundaries of the road diet. In Reno, a road diet along Wells Avenue successfully improved safety for motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians. After redesigning the road from 4 travel lanes to 2 travel lanes, a median, and 2 bike lanes, there was a 30% decrease in overall crashes, and pedestrian crashes reduced by 54%. The speeds were also reduced by 5 to 9 miles per hour, with only a 10% drop in traffic volume. In Seattle, Dexter Avenue was converted from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane road that features a transit route and bike lanes. The results were an increase in bus ridership and high volumes of bike riders. There are approximately 300 southbound bicyclists per hour during the AM peak and 580 motorists per hour during the same peak, which reduces congestion because cyclists are taking more spatially efficient vehicles to their destinations, and improves air quality because bikes do not produce emissions. These road diets are proven to be a substantially more effective method for reducing speeds, reducing collisions, and overall improving safety than reminding people of their personal responsibility to remain safe. The best solution to reducing the number of fatalities on our roadways is a nationwide effort to reduce lanes, add traffic calming geometry, and reallocate space so it can be more comfortably used by pedestrians and cyclists. The design of the road needs to force drivers to slow down, better observe their surroundings, and make better decisions as they are maneuvering through the obstacles. It is better to inconvenience drivers with slightly longer commute times if it means people can comfortably walk around the city that they live in without having to worry about helmets, reflective gear, or pedestrian beacons than to have them share responsibility with motorists during an accident.